Right now, in the middle of 2026, Denver has one of the highest apartment vacancy rates it's had in 16 years. More than 34,000 apartments sat empty at the end of last year, and the numbers this spring barely moved off that. At the same time, condo prices in the city are actually falling, and condos are sitting on the market for over a month before they sell. Here's the confusing part. Denver isn't losing population. People are still moving here. So why are so many homes just sitting there, empty, while prices keep dropping? That's what I want to actually explain in this video. Not just throw numbers at you, but walk through why this happened, step by step, so it actually makes sense. Quick thing before we get into it, if you're someone who's trying to buy, sell, or rent in a market like this, I break down what's actually happening in cities across the country every week, using real data instead of guesswork. If that's useful to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Okay, let's get into Denver. So first, let's answer the basic question. How do you get thousands of empty units in a city where people still want to live? The answer isn't complicated once you see it. Over the last 10 years, developers built roughly 125,000 new apartment units across the Denver metro area. That's about a third of every single apartment that exists in the region today. For a while, that made total sense. Rents were rising fast, Denver was one of the top relocation cities in the country, and builders wanted a piece of that. But here's the part people forget. Building an apartment complex isn't quick. A project that gets approved and financed in 2021 doesn't open its doors until 2023, 2024, sometimes later. So a huge chunk of what got approved during the boom years is only finishing construction now, right as demand has cooled off and mortgage rates are keeping renters in place longer than expected. Basically, developers built for a market that no longer exists by the time the buildings were ready. That's the core reason you get a wave of empty units hitting all at once, even in a city that's still growing. Now let's look at the real data, because this is where you start to see how uneven the situation actually is. As of the most recent quarterly report from the Apartment Association of Metro Denver, the region's vacancy rate is holding around 7.5%, barely down from the 7.6% peak at the end of last year, which was already the highest vacancy rate in 16 years. Average rent across the metro area is sitting at about $1,758 a month, which is close to where it was 4 years ago. In other words, 4 years of rent growth have basically been erased. But it's not the same everywhere. Douglas County has the highest average rent in the metro area, close to $1,950. Adams County has the lowest, around $1,620. Denver and Arapahoe counties have the highest vacancy rates in the region, both around 8.2%, while Boulder and Broomfield are noticeably tighter, closer to 6.5%. And landlords aren't just lowering the sticker price, they're getting creative. Late last year, concessions hit the highest level in the 21-year history of this industry report. We're talking free rent, gift cards, raffles. On average, renters are getting deals worth about 9.5% off their rent, which works out to roughly 4 to 5 free weeks. If you're apartment hunting in Denver right now, that's worth knowing, because a lot of that discount doesn't show up in the advertised price. You have to ask for it.
Now here's where it gets more interesting, because condos are actually dealing with a different problem than apartments. As of this spring, condo prices in Denver had dropped to around $326,000, down a little over 2% from a year earlier. Condo sales volume was down close to 6% year over year. And by early summer, the wider attached category, which includes condos and duplexes, was seeing sales drop nearly 18% compared to the year before. As of this month, condos are sitting on the market for about 34 days on average, and that number has been climbing. So why are condos struggling even more than apartments? Two big reasons. First, condos are competing directly with all those new apartment buildings we just talked about. If you're a renter, why buy an older condo when a new apartment complex nearby is throwing in free rent and better amenities? Second, and this one surprises a lot of people, HOA and insurance costs have gotten seriously expensive. Colorado has some of the worst hail risk in the entire country, and that's driven home insurance premiums up over 50% since 2023, and roughly double what they were in 2020. The average Colorado homeowner's insurance bill is now around $4,164 a year. For condo buildings specifically, some HOA master insurance policies, the ones that cover the whole building, have gone up somewhere between 200 and 500%. That cost gets passed straight to owners through monthly HOA dues, which for a lot of Denver condos now runs somewhere between $300 and $600 a month, and even higher for high-rises with amenities. So when a buyer's comparing a condo to a house, they're not just looking at the sale price anymore. They're doing math on HOA fees, insurance, and whether the building's finances are healthy, and a lot of buyers are deciding it's not worth the risk.
There's also a bigger affordability story sitting underneath everything we just covered. As of this summer, the typical mortgage payment on a median-priced Colorado home eats up over 41% of a household's gross income. For comparison, lenders have traditionally said anything above 30% puts a buyer in house-poor territory. Mortgage rates are sitting around 6.5%, and the median home price in the metro area is close to $616,000. So even with prices softening and vacancy climbing, plenty of buyers simply can't qualify for what's on the market. That affordability squeeze connects to something else happening in the city. Denver has more than 10,000 people experiencing homelessness, according to the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, up about 8% from the year before. That gap, thousands of empty units next to thousands of people without housing, has pushed some housing advocates to propose what they're calling a ghost tax, basically a penalty on landlords who leave units sitting vacant instead of renting them out. Landlord groups are pushing back hard on that idea. Drew Hamrick, who represents the Apartment Association of Metro Denver, has argued that a high vacancy rate is actually good news for renters because it's what's forcing prices down in the first place. His worry is that taxing vacant units would just push landlords to raise rents elsewhere to cover the penalty, which would hurt the same renters the tax is supposed to help. Even affordable housing isn't immune to this. Income-restricted units, the ones set aside for people making up to 80% of the area's median income, are sitting around 18.7% vacant according to state housing finance data. That's actually higher than market rate vacancy. The reason is affordability at the very bottom of the income scale. Some renters still can't afford the discounted rent on these units, so even affordable housing sits empty. So where does that leave Denver as of this month? On the rental side, the vacancy rate is holding in the mid-7% range. Rents are basically flat, and landlords are still offering discounts to fill units. On the ownership side, homes overall are lingering on the market noticeably longer than they were even a month ago, and condos in particular are taking the longest to sell of any property type. There is a silver lining for the rental side, though. New construction has slowed down a lot. There are still roughly 50,000 units in the pipeline, but around 20,000 of those projects haven't been able to break ground and could lose their approvals if they stall much longer. Industry analysts expect fewer new units to hit the market going forward, which means this current oversupply is likely to shrink on its own over the next year or two, rather than repeat itself. So to actually answer the question from the title, Denver isn't sitting on empty homes because people don't want to live there. It's sitting on empty homes because developers built a huge wave of new apartments for a market that had already changed by the time those buildings were finished, while condo owners are getting squeezed from a completely different direction by rising insurance and HOA costs. Both of those things are working themselves out right now, just slowly. If you're a renter, this is probably one of the best negotiating positions you've had in years. If you're a condo owner trying to sell, you're in a tougher spot, and it might take some patience. If this kind of breakdown was helpful, subscribe for more of these, and let me know in the comments if you want me to cover what's happening in a different city next.